than 50 people who registered for this session from both the US and Canada. We've got folks online from a number of cities and states across the country. We've got federal agencies, some NGOs, and a few consulting firms as well. So I want to welcome you all, and looking forward to the conversation. The question that we're really hoping to address today is how can we all share information about the performance of the buildings that are within a city or state in a way that is engaging, compelling, and of course, cost effective. So I'm hoping that we present some good ideas and some good solutions for all of you to be thinking about. Quick overview of what we'll be doing today. I will be just doing a quick 10-minute introduction and sort of frame the issue up. We'll have 3 presentations, about 15 minutes each. So you'll see a demo and hear a description about what's been happening in the city of Boston. We'll see what's been going on for the city of Chicago, a platform that's developed by Stamen Design. And then Urban Green will talk about the platform they've developed for New York City. If we have time during those 15-minute slots, we can have maybe 1 or 2 quick clarifying questions. But we want to leave most of the questions for the end of the webinar. We've allocated about 20 to 30 minutes for Q&A as needed. And then if there's any sort of additional wrap-up or some next steps we might want to consider as a group, we can discuss that as well. Housekeeping item, since we have so many people on the line in this webinar, all of you will be on mute except for the presenters, obviously. So we encourage you to submit questions throughout the individual presentations. You should have your control panel there on the side, and just click on the question bar to expand that and send us your questions. We will try to get through as many of those as we can during the course of today's webinar. This session is also being recorded, so if any of you had associates that wanted to join but couldn't, we will make the link available shortly after this webinar. So let me just say a few words about who we are, the Institute for Market Transformation. We are a small, about a 40-person NGO located in Washington, D.C., and our mission is to promote energy efficiency in buildings such that we can ultimately achieve a future in which the social, environmental, and economic value of energy efficiency is fully realized and all buildings are highly efficient. How do we do that? We help people design, adopt, and implement building energy efficiency policies. We consult directly to state and local governments as well as federal agencies. And we also engage directly with the real estate markets so that they can integrate energy efficiency considerations into all of their business processes. So basically, we're policy wonks that also want to make sure that things are happening in the real world and that we're achieving real results. So let's start talking about building energy information, performance information. The data that we can get about buildings is something that all of us on this call are hopefully quite interested in. All the big questions about how can we collect data, how can we manage it, what can you do with that data, and most importantly, how can you use that to really drive changes in the market and in the things that people do with their buildings. The first step with building performance data has always been just, can we get that data? And that was a big challenge for many years. Fortunately, with all of the activity happening right now with benchmarking programs and other related energy efficiency policies, that information is becoming more available to everybody. In addition to all of the voluntary efforts that are underway, some great stuff with folks like BOMA and others, there are a number of policies that have been enacted at the state or local level. Currently, there are 16 cities and counties, as well as 2 states, that have enacted policies that now affect more than 56,000 properties across the U.S., and that covers about 6.5 billion square feet of real estate. So a lot of the data is being collected now at long last. The big challenge is how can that be used and shared in ways that will be truly impactful. When these programs first began to develop, people were just doing things like posting a spreadsheet with a lot of data. And even if you could see the details on the spreadsheet, it probably wouldn't be very compelling to you. It wouldn't really encourage you to do much with this information unless you're a real policy wonk or an energy service provider that is data mining this for some opportunities. So the real question is how to make this information much more engaging and much more compelling. It's being done in a number of different ways. This is an example of some work that's being done in the city of Chicago with assistance by Seventh Wave, where they're actually developing customized building scorecards so that individual building owners will get scorecards like this to tell them how their building is performing compared to peers. And it also lists a few things that you might want to be thinking about for your particular building. What are some actions that you should consider taking? So very targeted information, which could really have a big impact on decisions that individual building owners make. There's actually a very rich landscape of different kinds of solutions that are being developed and deployed right now. This is a graphic that's part of a paper being written right now by Lauren Zullo with NRDC, as well as myself and Amberly Young with IMT. This will be released in the summer, in August, and it's an attempt to really show this entire landscape of solutions that address different audiences. Some have very publicly facing data, others are designed for specific owners or property managers, and the data can range from being very specific to very broad-based kind of market sector. We're going to focus today on these platforms that have public-facing, fairly detailed information about individual buildings and present them in these data visualization platforms. There are, even within that little sector, there are a number of different solutions that are out there right now. Today's presentation is not meant to be an exhaustive survey of all the platforms. I encourage you to look at some of these other ones as well if you get a chance. But today we're going to focus on 3 of these, the one in Boston, Chicago, and New York City. And the reason that we selected these 3 is that they provide a good spectrum of the kinds of solutions that are available. The one in Boston, as quick background, was developed in October 2014, and it was built internally by their own IT department using their existing open data platform and then linking that to their existing GIS system. So totally based on internal city resources. The second one in Chicago was developed by Stamen Design, a web design firm out of California. They did that to help support the City Energy Project, which is a national energy efficiency initiative being led by IMT and NRDC, working with 10 cities across the country to help them improve the energy efficiency of their buildings. So this Stamen platform was designed to help those cities have a cost-effective and scalable solution to be able to present their data. And that package solution is now being made available to cities that are outside of the City Energy Project as well. And then finally, New York City's package, this is the one developed by Urban Green, the local affiliate of the USGBC, called Metered New York. And that's designed to go a little bit further down the spectrum and not only present information about how the building's performing, but also give building owners some more contextual information, such as the incentives that are available to them, so that it really takes it to that next step of helping them understand what actions they can make and what their resources should be. This, again, is a system that has some modular features, should be relatively easily customizable by others that want to try deploying a similar solution. In addition to having some demos, we've asked each of the presenters to really give you some understanding of what does it take to implement a solution like this. Were there any particular limitations that they were working with in their current deployment? What sort of staffing or financial resources were needed, both for the upfront deployment as well as on an ongoing basis as each year of new annual data has to be loaded in, or there are certain things that have to be done for that. And then building upon that, what would it take for any future jurisdiction that wants to take advantage of this same kind of solution to do? What kind of resources would they have to bring to bear as well? So with that, I'm going to introduce our 3 speakers. We're going to start with Nikhil Narkani. Nikhil is the Climate and Buildings Program Manager for the City of Boston. In that position, he's been leading all of the city's work for their BERDA ordinance, the Building Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance. So he's had deep hands-on experience working with building owners, managing this program, and really understanding what the what the challenges are, making sure this information is actionable. Jim Stanley is the general manager for Stamen Design. Stamen comes at this not from the energy efficiency world, but more from the data visualization world. They use maps and data visualization to really help tell compelling stories. So they have taken this challenge on of what can be done with energy performance data and really present that in a very compelling way to the public. And then finally, Lori Kerr, who's policy director for Urban Green. Some of you may also know her from her previous role. She was with New York City with the mayor's office there, and she really helped develop many of New York City's groundbreaking policies around benchmarking, audits, and some of the other programs they have in place there. And now in her current role as policy director for Urban Green, she's continuing to lead work in those areas, both in New York City and at a national level. So with that, it's showtime. Let's go ahead and turn this over to Nikhil, and we'll hear about what's been going on in Boston.
Thanks, Jason. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We don't see anything on the screen yet.
How about now?
Yes, you're live. All yours.
Okay, great. All right, thank you everyone for joining us, and thanks Jason for organizing today. Just want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the experience we've had here in visualizing and sharing the data from Boston's Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance. So just a bit of background here. In Boston, we passed our Energy Reporting and Disclosure Ordinance in May 2013 with phased-in requirements, which probably many of you are very familiar with. Started with municipal buildings in 2013, proceeding with buildings over 50,000 square feet in 2014 and 2015. And then this year and next year, the ordinance will be encompassing all buildings above 35,000 square feet. So the ordinance requires Boston to make this data public starting in October of 2015. And just to give you a sense of scale, at that time it was about 1,350 buildings, both municipal, housing authority, and private sector, that we would be sharing information on, and that encompassed about 250 million square feet. At full implementation, this will be scaling up to about 2,400 buildings. So throughout the summer of 2015, I had a number of conversations with stakeholders in various ownership sectors in Boston. Commercial real estate, healthcare, and higher ed are primary constituencies for large buildings. We really wanted to understand what sort of metrics would be the most meaningful to those stakeholders. So Jason asked me to talk a little bit about the goals, and overarchingly, we wanted this interface, this disclosure, to provide an engaging means for Bostonians to understand the energy use of the buildings that they live in and they work in. We have an initiative called Greennovate Boston, which really seeks to engage the community in understanding energy efficiency in their homes and workplaces, and this is a component which not only provides transparency to the real estate market, but also fits in nicely with the community engagement around energy use. So as part of that, we really want to accurately convey information about reporting buildings. In particular, the ordinance also tasks the city to disclose any user-submitted information, contextual information that owners have provided. So we saw about a quarter of buildings provide this information, on the types of uses within the building beyond, just the portfolio manager uses, and describing some of the work that they had underway in improving their building's performance. So we wanted to utilize internal resources in the first year, and I emphasize this to say that we're very happy with the way it's launched, but we are exploring ways to build on that. And if that means additional interactivity could result from bringing in third-party components, that's something we are continuing to explore. So what were the internal resources that we want to build on? First of all, we have an open data portal that shares a lot of the city's data sets. You can see in the screenshot, crime incident reports, for example, and people can connect to that via API. We also have energy mapping platforms, data mapping platforms. This is an open space map for the city. So we wanted to utilize that type of resource. And we have Greenovate Boston's website, which shares information and resources on sustainability throughout the city. So one of the goals that I mentioned was the need to visualize buildings and their data accurately. And in some of the other disclosure approaches out there, I know there's the use of sort of dots to indicate the address of the reporting building. But we quickly realized that given the types of buildings that are reporting in Boston, this may not convey the most accurate picture of what has reported. So this is a Google Earth screenshot of our hospital district, Longwood. And there's a huge mess of buildings in here, but realistically there's, I think, 8 or 9 hospital entities that have reported. Some of them, disaggregated by building, some of them are campuses. And if I asked you to pick out just based on 8 or 9 dots, what those entities are, it'd be pretty impossible. Some of them have one address and it encompasses 3 different wings and a separate section across the street connected by a bridge. So we really wanted to work towards really conveying what those buildings were. Similar example, this entire complex shares one address, but reported as 4 different entities because it actually is. So we worked with our IT department, and they geocoded the addresses from Portfolio Manager. So you can see here, these are 2 dots for municipal buildings in the first run. And these are screenshots from Esri ArcGIS, by the way. And then in our department, we work to match these to the building shapes. So the city has a layer of all of the building footprints in the city. And we work to ensure that the dots were selecting the right building. This is actually a really good example. In the center is one of our high schools. And you can see, going back one slide here, the dot really indicates one street address. But realistically, the building that we're talking about spans a block and a half. And we really wanted to make sure that was being conveyed when someone clicked on that point of information or clicked on the building, and so they could know what was being represented. After that, there was an extensive amount of what's been referred to as hand-to-hand combat. And that took about 6 weeks of an intern's time to verify how things were being mapped. Some of those campus issues I mentioned, some of the multi-building issues I mentioned. And we used a lot of Google Earth and clues in Portfolio Manager, I should say, when people submitted a building and said, I'm referring to the 9-story section here, that helped make sure our mapping was accurate. We also mapped non-compliant buildings then. And we launched a soft launch in August. So, the full launch was in October, so 2 months prior, we did a soft launch with municipal buildings only. And this really enabled the city, our department, to figure out some of the issues that we're going to run into, but also provided a preview to building owners so they would understand the type of interface that their building would appear on 2 months later. And so then we launched in October 2015. The remaining step there is once you have the shapes in ArcGIS, we basically cleaned up the Portfolio Manager data for 2015 and just matched it in, joined it in basically. The final result is a geodatabase of all of the buildings that are required to report, and the ones that have reported have data attached to them. The ones that don't show up as non-compliant. We heard from our stakeholders quite a bit that they didn't want people visiting this website and simply highlighting or being able to color code all of the buildings' EUIs from green to red, because quite simply all of our hospitals and labs would show up in bright red, and K through 12 schools would show up in green. I'm sure many of you would be familiar with that in your cities. So we respected that and created an interface where people could look up buildings by different property type And what we're really highlighting is compliance and the city's own disclosure. So let's take a quick look here. So this is our website, and we are sharing some findings here, some descriptions of the different metrics. You can download the flat file of the data submitted, and then you can view the map. So this is built on our enterprise GIS system, which the city has had a license for many years. And if we scroll to, let's pick this over here, what you can see is all of the selected metrics that we do stakeholders being disclosed. You can look at breakdown by energy source, some of that user submitted info, which this property chose not to, Energy Star score, things like that. We can also filter by property name, or we can also filter by property type. And there is also an address lookup for just sort of Google Maps type of lookup. To switch back to the presentation, just flip back. So just to wrap this up, Jason asked me to describe some of the resources it took, and I would say the initial launch, going through 1,300 buildings, took about 2 months of one of our interns' time to really verify all of the buildings to make sure that every building that submitted a report did in fact show up on the map, and that no building that showed up as non-compliant was falsely indicated as such, because that would be a major mistake on the city's part. It took about 1.5 months of my time in coordinating resources and working with our IT department and coordinating between stakeholder needs and the IT department's capabilities in how this map would portray data. Going ahead, we have designed the system so that it is easily refreshable, easily updatable. So as I mentioned, once we have that set of building shapes in ArcGIS, I joined in the 2015 Portfolio Manager data. This May, we're just going to join in this year's data, and that estimate is less than 6 hours of effort a year, just to make sure that data is cleaned up, matched in, and then it's sent over to the IT team, and they upload it in a matter of minutes. We've already done this a couple of times since that October launch for buildings that submitted revised or updated data. Of course, in the long run, we'd love to move to a system where it's a more instantaneous flow, but we think for the current implementation, it's definitely a very manageable amount of work to update and keep it moving forward. Given that our ordinance is expanding in 2016 and 2017 to approximately 800, 900 more buildings, I do anticipate it will take about a week each year, probably, of one of our interns' efforts to map those new buildings. And we'll be similarly showing the data for the buildings that reported and showing the new buildings that didn't comply. So I'm happy to take a couple of questions now, and thanks everyone for listening.
Great, thanks, Nikhil. That was excellent. We did have a couple of questions that came in during your presentation. One of them was a quick clarification of what is the name of the engagement program that you have here in Boston. I'm not sure if they're referring to BERTO itself or if you have any other separate engagement process or program that you're working with.
Sure. So the Environment Department runs a engagement campaign called Greenovate Boston, and this is really a community-based partnership with residents and community groups to understand different ways they can be sustainable and reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions through collective action. We launched our energy reporting map within that platform, within that website, and that's why it's at burdo.greeninnovateboston.org.
Great, thanks, Nikhil. And then one other question that came in: was there any consideration at all to using color coding for other attributes? I understand why you didn't want to use it for EUI, but for example, for the Energy Star score as one possibility.
Yes, we did consider that. I think the sort of compromise we arrived at a little bit was the initial launch will show compliance, and then the raw data is out there for anyone to build their own map with. And we have actually seen a company start to play with that data and share one of the iterations with us where they created an Energy Star score map.
Great, thanks. And then one other question. The resources that you're talking about were for your team as far as being able to verify the building information, the overall program management for that. What sort of additional IT resources were required, or was this already an existing platform and there was really nothing else that they had to do to customize it to accommodate this new data?
So the license and the server capacity and stuff was already available to us. I would say the conversations, sort of their staff time to get it up and running as its own web map, was probably a week of conversation back and forth and sort of customizing all of these different attributes and the types of searches we wanted. So maybe I would say 20 hours of IT staff time, ballpark figure.
Great, great. Sounds like a really excellent solution you have there. So we're going to hold off on the remaining questions, but we'll try to cover them at the end of the three presentations. And now we're going to switch over to Jim Stanley, and we'll hear about the solution that Stamen has developed for the City of Chicago. So Jim, if you're on the line, it's all yours.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, but your audio is very faint.
Is that any better?
That's better. Yes, thank you.
So hi, everybody. Thanks, Jason, for the invitation to present our work. I'm just going to do a little bit of orientation on Stamen and then just dive into a demonstration of what we built for the City of Chicago. As Jason said at the outset, Stamen Design is a data visualization studio. We were founded in 2001, and we exclusively focus on data visualization and visual mapping. And we work for a wide range of clients, from commercial customers to NGOs to university-level clients, basically helping clients to tell stories, as we like to say, founded in their data. One of our recent projects, just to give you a little bit of sample of the type of work that we do, you may have, just as an individual, heard about the Best School Day campaign last week that Donors Choose launched with Stephen Colbert and a number of other celebrities. It's backed by Huffington Post, and we basically helped them build an interactive website for tracking their crowdfunding for public schools on this campaign that happened last week. So that was a really exciting project for us. We do about 40 projects a year on average. Like I said, we've been doing this since 2001, since before data visualization was really a thing, and have really matured along the trajectory of the industry, and we're all for helping it grow. The project we're here to talk about today is one that we worked on last year with IMT and NRDC. Specifically, IMT and NRDC came to Stamen to build out city energy project websites for Chicago and Salt Lake City. I'm going to walk you through here in a second a demo of the website. We spent a lot of time in this effort with our clients to basically come up with the design, work with the data so that we could ultimately launch the website. But I think part of the intent of building this was to build a platform that would allow other cities, be they city energy project cities or other cities not associated with CEP, to come to this platform, bring in very structured data, and be able to have a tool set just like this. And that's what we were able to accomplish. I'm going to switch now over to the actual website. You can see in the presentation, this is all being recorded, right? The URL, if you want to explore it on your own. We just host it up on GitHub. And let me switch over now over to the website. So here we are right now. We basically have an interactive web application built in CartoDB, which is another, one of a few geospatial platforms out there. The gentleman prior mentioned Esri. CartoDB is another one out there that's open source, and we used it to basically render all of this building data coming from the city of Chicago on the map and make it interactive. I'll take a quick tour to show you the types of data that we were provided with and that we're rendering now. I'll just pick out a building at random here. You can see here's this building at 640 North LaSalle, the property type, the property size, etc. Energy Star's rating was something that was provided to us. The site energy use and the GHG emissions. You can actually explore the map and the buildings provided for the city of Chicago with all of these different filter tools over on the side, from property size filters to these are sliders here that will filter on the property size, the year build, number of buildings, getting down into energy use, the electricity, there's a number of different facets here, from electricity down to natural gas, direct stream, chilled water use, other fuels, the energy performance metrics. I mentioned Energy Star. The color coding in this application changes based on which view or filter you want to look at the buildings through, and then it all correlates to the map. And so you can see, let's just pick out this building here. And so you can see it has an Energy Star rating of 98. That's green over here. Red, it says a very low Energy Star score of 4. We also have data on greenhouse gas emissions flowing into the tool as well, and then you can basically compare buildings as well. There is a data set down here in the lower part of the pane where you can actually see the buildings and look at the actual data itself, not just explore it through the map. There's a search function as well where you can search by address. I won't do that now, as well as basically some geofences set up within the tool based on neighborhood for Chicago that you can filter on as well, and property type as well. I'm doing a very quick tour of the tool here, just in the interest of time. One thing that the tool does support, but that we don't have data for in the tool right now, is time. So you could see if we had any more data than 2015. If you can see my cursor floating over there on the top left-hand side, you could slide this and see how the data is trending for the city of Chicago or any city that uses this tool set over time for its participant buildings. One thing I will say that I think that led into the creation of this tool was to make this very intuitive to use and easy, not just for cities, but that the contributing property owners or property managers providing data on their buildings could understand exactly how that data was being used, so that it's transparent to them when they report on their building's data that to this service. Then it's easy for them to understand how it's being used, and hopefully attract more property owners as well, I would presume, to report data. I'm going to switch back to the presentation now. Just give me 1 second. And you can access this yourself by simply visiting cityenergyproject.github.io/Chicago. I have contact information at the back of this deck if you are interested in following up with Stamen further. So in terms of working with us, we work hands-on with data from the earliest possible stages of a project. We design with data, not try to take data and shoehorn it into design. That way, all the products that we build, we know with a high degree of confidence that it is designed for the data stories that exist within that data set. It really allows us to build great tools for exploring different data stories. And that's how we approached the CEP project as well. For this, as I mentioned, the intent was to build a tool set not just for these 2 cities, but that could be expanded to handle other cities, assuming they came with a fairly standardized requirements. As we've talked about with IMT, we could easily replicate this effort for other cities in the range from, at the easiest level from $5,000 to probably $10,000 at the high end, assuming that a city accepts the functional and design issues that I demonstrated and that you can explore yourself at the website. One other thing I probably should have mentioned earlier, but that I'll mention now, is that we are currently in the effort of migrating the Chicago City Energy Project website to handle the SEED API. The SEED API contains all the data types that that I showed and that we built, just accessing data through a flat file for the City of Chicago. And so if a partner city comes to us with data already supported in SEED, I know it's in its earliest stages now, as it's only been launched within the last couple of months. In any case, if you come to us with your data in SEED, it is that much easier for us to render the data. We can also work with other data formats, and then any desired changes, as we are a creative studio. Any desired changes that a city might have to design or functionality or handling data readiness issues, which we deal with clients all the time, we would just basically quote that on top of the price range that I mentioned earlier. There are contact info. My name is Jim Stanley. Again, you can contact me. It's not on the slide. Directly at jim@stamen.com. We're a fairly small studio, so if you just email info@stamen.com, that's sure to reach me. And that is about it. So I will stop there and ask for any questions that people might have.
Great, Jim. Thank you very much for that presentation. And please keep your questions coming in. We're getting a few filtering, but we certainly have we'll have some time at the end for some more detailed questions as well. A couple things that did come up. First of all, explanation for those that aren't familiar with it. SEED that Jim was referring to is the DOE's Standard Energy Efficiency Data Platform. So that's a free open source platform that the DOE has been developing. There are about 10 cities around the country that are the inaugural partners in starting to work with SEED as a means, a common platform that cities and other jurisdictions can use to gather data from portfolio managers. So this is a new developing standard. If you're not familiar with it, you should definitely pay attention to it. We're hoping that it becomes very widespread in its adoption across the country. But Jim, one other question that came in is, can you talk some more about the resources that a city would need after initial deployment for, again, adding in the new annual updates of data and things like that?
Sure. We would, if you're not working with SEED, which is basically a service for handling your data, and I've got that up on screen right now so everybody can see that. We would work with you, any given client, through the engagement to basically help you understand this is the data format that's required. It can be as simple as a CSV file describing the different data attributes for any given property. And we would provide that, just basically the spec that we developed for Chicago and Salt Lake City as basically a requirement of this is to come forward with. It's a simple table at the end of the day with all the data that's needed to render the properties and all the data dimensions on the map. I didn't want to get into that level of sort of eye chart of the data in this presentation, but it is fairly simple. And then from a go-forward standpoint, you just need to maintain that data, and the application can read data off of the table as it updates, whether you're adding additional properties or you're adding different ratings for over time.
Great, thanks, Jim. And then sort of a follow-up to that, the numbers that you were talking about for initial deployment, are there any additional charges, any licensing fees, annual costs, anything like that on top of that upfront charge then?
Great question. Not necessarily. It would depend on the engagement with us. If the city wanted us to support the website over a duration longer than the development of the code, we do those types of arrangements as well, just based on how much support and maintenance, hosting, et cetera, if the city needs that they require. And we could certainly quote that based on what the city's needs were. It would be on a monthly basis, obviously a fraction of the development costs, but I don't want to necessarily get into what those specific costs would be here without really understanding what a given city's support and ongoing support and maintenance requirements would be.
Great. And then one final question for this part of the presentation. There was a question about what it would take, or why the decision was made on what it would take to do something similar to what Boston presented, where as opposed to just having a dot for each building, you actually had the complete building footprint that would show up in appropriate colors. Why was that decision made, and what kind of effort would be required to show footprints instead of dots?
It's really a design decision working with IMT and NRDC for the Chicago project based on just the design of this application. That's in terms of why that decision was made. Again, I think the desire was to keep it simple and very accessible for anybody who wanted to browse this data. We certainly could work with a city on a different UI that would show more specific buildings and color coding of those buildings, like as was shown in the last demo. We would just need to, if that was what a city wanted, we would quote that design work to them. Obviously, if we're getting into designing the application, that's going to be more cycles, and again, we would just quote that on top of the baseline for the application.
Great. All right, well, Jim, thank you very much. We're going to shift over to our next presentation now. So you should be live, and we're looking forward to hearing about what Urban Green has been doing for New York City.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. You are up.
All right. And sorry. Okay, there. Is it full screen now?
Yes, that looks great, Lori.
Okay, good. Thank you for having us, and thanks to my fellow presenters. It's really interesting to hear and see the different ways that people are thinking about presenting this kind of similar type of information. Looking forward, I thought I would start with what we would like to develop for the other cities, just to make sure I have enough time to cover it. We would be interested in working with other cities. We're not a city, unlike Boston. We are an independent nonprofit that has worked with the City of New York, and so we would be interested in working with multiple other cities in the same way, and customizing a website for each city, doing the data cleansing for the cities, pointing out local resources and case studies, promoting the site, which is very important because it's wonderful to have a site up and available, but if people aren't using it, it won't drive the market in the way that we all had hoped for. So in addition, we intend to have a way cooler map than we have right now that will show locations, types, and EUIs, perhaps Energy Star scores for properties. I think we would probably want to work with any cities that were working with us to kind of develop what people thought would be the most useful map. In addition, we think that packaging as many cities together where the information is shown in a consistent way has numerous advantages for the cities and for the industry as a whole. We think that if there's a unified way of seeing the data, that takes the friction out of understanding data. So if there's a large property owner that wants to look at their property across different cities, having a unified way of seeing the data really helps. We also think that it provides a greater critical mass for people looking at benchmarking data. So in a sense, we think that being something like the Craigslist of energy data would be good. So in other words, this launches with Metered New York, but it could have metered Berkeley, metered San Francisco, metered Kansas City, all kind of linked. And once those are linked, one could easily toggle between cities, and then you could cross-search between cities, so you could start to actually look at multifamily buildings across all cities, northeastern cities, whatever data set you wanted to look at. So we would love to be the one-stop shop for city data, and we think that providing such a one-stop shop would be very helpful for the whole industry moving forward. The cost, we think we would want to have a person working full-time to do this, because it's not just a site. Our idea is that the data is very helpful, but we want to be providing other information like case studies, what kinds of utility programs are out there, and other really valuable, actionable information that can help building owners go from numbers to action. So we think having 3 more cities is kind of the hurdle for us to expand this to multiple cities. And then as we're not trying to make money on this, we just want to pay for updating the base tool. That's a one-time setup charge that would give us a CMS that could be more easily adapted to every city, and then an annual fee for updating, cleaning all the data and all of the information and so forth. So now let's look at how the site works. This is the home page, and this is the home page, and you see here a map that shows some of the featured buildings, and it shows a search bar at the top that enables you to look for a property by address, name, or the city has something called borough block and lot and building identifier. Then we have featured properties, we have news feeds, we have information from the local utility, all there on the homepage. Then we have featured buildings where we show buildings that either are high performers, or have shown great improvement over time. Then we go to the report card page. So for every building, there's a report card. I know you want to see the Empire State Building. So here it is. Here's all of the information on the Empire State Building, and zooming in, we can see that we're looking at Energy Star scores across. What's happening? Sorry, our slides are moving on their own accord. Just a second. So here's the what's happening? Do we know?
You keep talking.
Okay. Yes, but it's not where I want it to. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry about that glitch. But anyway, you can see here all of the commercial office buildings in the city of New York and the distribution of Energy Star scores. And they go from red to green, red being the poorest performers, green being the best. You can see that the Empire State Building is in the middle of the second quartile. So it has an Energy Star score of 82. Which is slightly above average in New York City. And then you can toggle Energy Star score, source EUI, greenhouse gas emissions, or water usage, and see the distribution, how your building sits in any of those metrics. Then for each building, because we now have 3 years of data, and in a month or so we'll have 2014, we can start to look at how the building Energy Star score has been changing over the years, and you could also look at that data across the other 4 metrics that we look at. And in this case, the building is Energy Star certified, so that shows with a little Energy Star symbol. And then you can scroll down and get much more specific information, including site EUI, the square footage, when it was built, and so forth. And then at the bottom, there's another feature. So building owners didn't want all this data necessarily showing up naked to the world. They wanted to be able to explain why their buildings maybe were not performing as well, or why they had so much energy use, or what they were intending to do. So the Contact Us allows building owners to reach us, look at drop-down menus of things that they're doing, and then that can go online with the building. In addition, there are some tooltips. So for the visitor to the site that doesn't understand what an EUI is, we explain that. We also we didn't editorialize. All of this is self-reported data. We didn't say, oh, that data, we're not going to show that data. But if the data looked abnormally high like this, EUI, we noted it. So it's kind of a light-handed touch. And also you can compare against the median for that type. So you can see the property, you can see the median, or you could toggle to the 75th percentile and get a good comparison. So the report card page really allows you to see your building in context. Then you could explore. So you could say you wanted to let's see. Say you wanted to look up multifamily housing in Brooklyn. You're shopping around for a post-war building, and you want it to be, less than 570,000 square feet. So you want a potentially large building, but not enormous. So there are 928 of those buildings, and you can see the distribution of Energy Star scores for those and the other metrics that were available. And then you can start sorting through those buildings and seeing where they are. So in this case, we've sorted from high to low energy use. So this would be a way that a widget seller might want to access this data. So in other words, if you had a great new variable frequency drive and you wanted to get that out to these buildings, you would want to find the worst performers first and go sell your product to them. But if you're a greenie and you want to find the best performing building and that's where you want to live, you want to go from low to high. So Explorer allows you to really zero in down to the neighborhood or zip code level to properties that you might want to look at, compare them, and search for the ones you want to find. Then you can compare. So you could go back to those Brooklyn. You could go back to those Brooklyn apartment buildings and pick the 4 that you were interested in and click on them, and then find much more detailed information about each one and compare them side by side. In addition, we have FAQs. What does primary property type mean? What does last major alteration mean? Things like that. We look at resources such as financing and incentives, information about the city's benchmarking program, reports that people might want to find, and then we have an about page that really looks at benchmarking in New York, the history of it, what building owners need to do, and so forth. So that's kind of the overview of Meter of New York.
Great. Thank you, Lori. That was really interesting. So one of the questions that came in is sort of the urban green vision of the world. You talked earlier on about how you would love to be able to do this for a number of cities and could reduce costs and everything by providing more of a shared service. Is your vision that there would be a single site that individual cities could all rely on and kind of zoom in and out of the individual cities on that site, or would it simply be a number of parallel city-specific sites that you would want to set up?
I think it could work either way. They could be either individual sites or linked sites. We certainly want to roll up the information at the end of the day and be able to look across sites.
Hi, this is John. I'm the Communications Manager at Urban Green Council. I think Lori mentioned Craigslist earlier, and that's one of the touchstones that we keep coming back to when we talk about developing this site, which is that there's, metered New York, and that allows you to drill down and see everything in metered. And then if there were other cities, that you would, again, have the same visual language across every city so that somebody looking in Toledo could understand exactly the same thing somebody in New York could. And then the option to aggregate and do it across, ideally in the same site, but it could certainly be done separate sites.
Great. Thanks, John. And then one question going back to the pricing. I think you talked about a $25,000 quote per city if there were 3 cities, I believe. Was that a per city or a total cost then, just to be clear about that?
That's a per city cost. And I think that's because we're really looking at full service here, which would include data cleaning, outreach, collecting exemplary buildings, and so forth. We don't think that putting the information out there without the additional information is going to push things far enough, fast enough. We think that you need to have more.
Great. Okay, so I know that a few folks may have to start dropping off here at the top of the hour, so if you do, feel free to do so, obviously. If there are some questions that we can't get to now, we'll try to make sure that we connect the person that submitted those to the right person on our end to make sure that you do all get answers for your questions here. But let me go back. Actually, Amber, if you could send it back to my screen. Let's see here. All right, so let's go back through a few of the questions that were of a more general nature. I think we had a lot of questions about, are these sites really working? So are people tracking the sort of traffic that you're getting? What sort of feedback are you getting? Are these sites really achieving the goals that the cities have for engaging with building owners? So let me open up to any of the presenters that would like to respond to that.
Hey, it's John again. We've been tracking. We have the website, fully integrated with Google Analytics, so we can see which properties people are looking at, what types of pages people are looking at, and there is a fair amount of success that we're very happy with. We've got over 20,000 page views, several thousand unique visitors to the site, and again, as Lori mentioned, promotion is sort of part of the business model that we have going forward, because it's great to have a website and make a big splash about it, but we want to keep treading water and make it integrated into the building community and have people keep on going. Most popular pages are the report card pages, and the featured buildings that we have are the most popular of those buildings.
Great, thanks, John. And as a follow-up again to any of you, are there any plans, or has anybody been doing work to actually reach out to the building owners and understand, is it working for them? I mean, it's great that they're beginning to visit the sites, but is it giving them the information that they need, building owners or the public as a whole, to really begin taking action? So is anybody aware of data along those lines, or are there any plans at all to develop initiatives to really do that kind of follow-up work?
Well, we've been talking to some of the bigger building owners who we thought would not find this site that useful, because we thought they were already so sophisticated that they had access to this data in this sort of way already. And they told us that it's very helpful for them in understanding how their buildings are performing. So that was a big surprise to us.
This is Nikhil in Boston. So we work very closely with a number of sector groups on sustainability. There's this downtown business group called A Better City. There's Healthcare Without Harm. There's a green tourism group that works with hotels. And they have been some of our most interested users of the website, saying that they're looking for their members that either haven't complied or that could use some follow-up given what their EUI is.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Obviously, that's the goal of all these sites, and I know it's difficult to really get that kind of information. So I'm glad to hear that there's at least some initial efforts to find out. There was another question along that same line. I know that Jim, you at least showed a little about year-to-year comparisons and how that can work. But are any of you looking at features that would allow people to track whether this information has affected performance, and then displaying that in such a way that people can actually see improvements in individual building performance over time?
Well, I think we have the progress bar in metered New York. Jason, is that what you're thinking of, or were you thinking about something else?
Yeah, either on an individual building level or across the city as a whole, some way to visually assess whether buildings are trending in the right direction.
Yeah, Jason, this is Jim. I mean, I think, yes, as long as in the application we built, if the data has a time dimension to it, the application will show that. I would go back to talk about some of the report cards that you showed at the beginning of the presentation. It's just a way to communicate directly with property owners about how their ratings are trending over time.
But in terms of the overall city information, that's usually handled in the citywide benchmarking reports. And so we would probably put that kind of information in that last section, which is about benchmarking, which does go to the more macro issues in the city. That's how we had been handling it. So we sort of took the greatest hits from the benchmarking reports and put them there.
I'll also add that on that individual report card page, we do have the progress chart that you can see energy use, Energy Star score, water, and greenhouse gas emissions, as long as they're for as many years as we have the benchmarking data. And then from a separate database, we also are able to display the date of the last major renovation, which is the Department of Finance designation that we include. And a lot of times it's really cool to go to a particular property and then you can see that they did a renovation in 2012, and then you can actually watch their energy use take a dive on the same year. That's been it's very interesting to see that coordination.
That's great to hear. And just as a plug for some of the things that we see ultimately happening with the SEED platform we were talking about before, there really is a need to bring together all this information about interventions in a building. You know, have they performed an audit? Have the utility incentive been provided? Things like that, and then being able to correlate that to the actual changes in building performance over time. So I personally see that as one of the next great opportunities and great needs. So I'm hoping that these platforms do begin to reflect that more. Had a question about the data itself, so diving into some of the details. When you have outliers, and Laura, you talked about this a little bit about how you may have some EUI numbers that you know are probably bad numbers, extremely high or extremely low numbers. How does that affect the sort of distribution curves, the way things are being presented in the analytics on the metered side or any of the other sides? Because obviously that could affect the buckets, the distribution of the quartiles that you're defining in working with data. Are those outliers filtered or thrown out in any way, or are they just mixed with everything else?
In our analysis for metered, the outliers are taken out in the distributions.
Great. Okay. Let's see. What else do we have going here? I don't think you touched on this yet, Lori, but is metered specifically tracking your throughput, your referrals to the utility program? You display some of the incentives and everything available, but do you track specific traffic that then gets redirected to utilities?
No, but that's an interesting idea. Could we do that, John?
Mm-hmm. Track outgoing link. Tracking the outgoing links. Is that what you mean?
Just tracking the success. So people are coming to the site. They're seeing, you know, here are some incentives that you should be thinking about. But is there any way to capture, you know, almost like a Google click-through, that they read about the incentive and now they've actually gone to the utility to find out more about the next steps?
We can track. We have a sidebar that displays incentives, and we're able to target that sidebar so that it'll display incentives based around the property type or other factors for whatever report card one's looking at. And we can definitely track if that's getting clicked on and when it's getting clicked on. Regard what they do after that, we can't track.
And to your point about the audits, we will be adding that. Because New York City has an audit and retro-commissioning ordinance, and buildings come due every 10 years and they're on a cycle. So in the next iteration, we intend to say whether or not the building has come due for the audit and retro-commissioning, and probably will show also if it complied.
Great. So some of the presentations touched on this a little bit, especially the Boston one, about not wanting to make some buildings look much worse than others, strictly through EUI. So one of our questions is more specifically about regulated versus unregulated loads, because if you have a data center, for example, that could make one building look like it's much more intensive and therefore not as energy efficient. Are there any other considerations or other ideas that you have as far as how these sites could take that into consideration, to really appreciate the differences in different types of loads and which loads are regulated versus unregulated, but still be able to present the information in a comparable way so people can understand where there are opportunities? Any thoughts that any of you can share about that?
Yeah, this is Nikhil. I think it's a really good question, and one we heard a lot as we work towards disclosure. Data centers and ground floor retail or supermarkets kind of especially stood out as concerns. So I think it's one thing we want to work toward. One thing we want to work towards is developing more tailored peer groups. And some of our statistical analysis over the past year has been on identifying useful peer groups. So this would be saying, instead of saying, here are all the offices in Boston, an office building, and compare that set, instead of that, we'd be saying, here are all the offices that have a secondary use on the ground floor or a data center. And maybe that's a way of providing a little bit more useful comparison.